Hey everyone, Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5 Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
Yo, what's poppin', Rush Nation? It's a sunny Friday evening. If you are watching live, if you are listening, I can't predict the weather. I'd be a much wealthier man if I could.
It'll
Thanks
be
for
raining.
listening.
You're probably listening in the rain.
Oh, come on. We've had at least 12 hours of sunshine since it's rained.
Right. I'm going to give you the weather forecast for the next few days in my area.
No, I can. Well, hang on. You are Middle Earth. That doesn't really count.
Saturday's not too bad. Sunday, rain. Monday, rain. Tuesday, rain. Wednesday, rain. Thursday, rain. Friday, cloudy. Saturday, cloudy. Sunday, cloudy. Yeah.
Well, I've got 2 hours of potential rain tomorrow night, an hour at Sunday lunchtime, and then the next 7 days is glorious sunshine. So, for all the positives are moving away, mate, the weather is clearly not one of them.
No.
We are 1 minute, 1 hour, 1 minute and 15 seconds into the podcast. We have people watching. I'm surprised there are still people watching. We are here to talk about fantasy football, but as usual, it's off season. We've started talking about weather.
Why not?
It's for the astute amongst us. And those watching live, it is Friday night. If you're not watching live, why not hit the bell and like and subscribe on Facebook? Come join the party because Murph and I always get, off topic. But yeah, thanks for watching, listening, subscribing and liking. We appreciate each and every one of you. And as I was going to say, the astute amongst you will notice it is Friday night. That's because Murph's had a hella week. And then my car decided to do, car stuff. And we had to push a day, so apologies for those who were waiting at 7:30 last night on tenterhooks, expecting Murph and I to dive into your YouTubes. We did not, but we are here right now. Murph, what are we talking about today? Some fantasy do's and don'ts for the big championships that have kicked off.
Yeah, we're starting to get closer to charity season in terms of drafts. It seems to get earlier and earlier. We used to always think that the Scottish Bowl was kind of like the first day of draft season, and then you got like Best Ball Mania and the big Best Ball gambling tournaments. Now I don't profess to be a big Best Ball like guru. I'm not saying that, but there is some sort of fundamental do's and don'ts that we can recommend and talk about. But the Biscuit Bowl, which is a large Best Ball tournament for charity, has kicked off. The Orkney Bowl, which has got 150, 200 people. That's kicked off today. Well, my draft has kicked off today, and that's a Best Ball tournament. So, these charity bowls are starting to sort of kick off. JTT is going to kick off at some point in the not too distant future. Then the Scottish Bowl, and then we'll get to Warrior Bowl, FFCC, etc. So you got sort of this June, July steadiness of the large charity tournaments, and it's good just to have a think about your strategy, what you're going to be doing. My record in these tournaments isn't terrible. I have some pretty notable finishes in charity tournaments over the years. I also have some pretty horrendous finishes as well. And I think, there's just some things I've learned from, 6-7 years in the Scottish Bowl, playing in the Warrior Bowl, playing in JTT, although I've always done fundamentally really bad in that, the EFFC, and all these other tournaments that are about. And, we'll just divulge what some of these are, because I think a lot of people go into it with the wrong strategy or looking at the wrong resources or the wrong mindset. And they get unstuck pretty quickly. And so hopefully this podcast will fine tune some thinking for some folks.
I think for me, I don't play in too many charity competitions because, not that I'm stingy, I just don't have the time to invest in the research needed because they are all so different. I think one of my potential do and don't is it's one and the same, and is you have to. Not every best ball is the same, so you can't have the same strategy for each one. And I think for me, it is having I think you do so well because not all of them, as you said, you have had some, but I think where you do so well is you have a plan going into each one specific for that tournament.
Yes and no.
Well, I'll take the yes. I'll take the yes of that portion then.
Say for things like the Scottish Bowl, like the FCE Eliminators. It's not really large. I mean, it's 18 people, so it's not really large, but concept kind of stands. Yeah, I would say for certain ones there is absolutely a strategy when I go in. For some of these, I enter these tournaments just to have a laugh and a bit of charity fun, and there are some times I do kind of just look at it on the fly. I don't recommend that. I do it, one, because again, as you just kindly mentioned, time is very limited. And it's not that I undervalue that tournament at all. It's far from that. It's a fact of I want to support the charity, I want to support the tournament, the play in it, recommend it, tweet it out to people. Always looks better if you're going to tweet out something and be in it than tweet out and not be in it. I like the community and the draft and stuff like that. So I get plenty of value, even if I don't necessarily create a bespoke plan for it. But I also do so many drafts that once I understand the scoring, I can work things out in my head and pivot. So I don't necessarily need to put together like a comprehensive plan going in. All I can do is look at how things are going. And there's some of the tips that I'm going to recommend in this show that I apply in that situation. So you don't necessarily, like, if you haven't been able to work out the plan and work out the scoring and the optimal way to go forward, I think that's okay, as long as you have this ability to read the rest of the room and read the situation and to build your lineup very differently. And I think if you can do that, you'll either be spot on or you'll crash and burn. But the one thing you won't be is mediocre, which I always think is the worst kind of place to be. I would much rather be really bold in the strategy and go out really early or be out of contention really early than kind of just tickle along and be completely in the middle and have no prospect of really doing all that well.
Yeah.
That sounds stupid, but I always
no.
the moon. And
yeah,
if it works out for you, then absolutely brilliant. And put together a mediocre team.
I joined a draft. Former family member of 5 Yard, Rob, he invited me to a quirky draft he had. He needed one more person, so he invited me to a draft where it's 8 or 10 team. It's a bit of an experiment draft, but it's a sophomore. It's going to be rookies only going forward, but it's only sophomore and rookies this year. And it's super flex, and there are only 10 starting quarterbacks that you can plug in. And everybody who knows and has been listening for a while knows that even in super flex, I'm not one for quarterback early. And in this draft, I looked at the room, I looked at the scoring, and I decided that if I could get a whole team of solid starters, I didn't need a quarterback this year. And my team is the third highest projected court team going. I know that's only projected, but I'm using sleepers projected here as air quotes. But my team is the third highest projected scoring team at this point without a starting quarterback. I do not have a starting quarterback in my lineup because I got greedy and people went quarterback. But I thought that I could build a team strong enough of my starters that I wouldn't need a quarterback because the quarterback scoring isn't high. So I am 5 points here or there behind the teams who have a quarterback, but their starters are potentially players who might get, 10 snaps a week. And of those, how many are they going to score points on? And that's how I built my team, hoping that maybe I can trade a draft pick in the future, or I can pick a quarterback up in the draft if my team does poorly this year. But next year, I have a whole team of starters, and then I'll have a quarterback. Yeah. And that's how I built my draft, because I planned to potentially be in contention this year. But if I wasn't, I knew that next year my team is ready to go, barring the quarterback. And I think, I'm not blowing smoke here, Murph, up your proverbial behind, but I think you are at the upper echelons of people I play fantasy football with, and I think you have the ability to in draft make those fine tunes, read the room, pick the scoring. Whereas I think the average player needs a bit more in these charity. This is what I'm talking about now, in these charity events to go in. You need to have the research. You need to understand the scoring, and you do need a game plan, because if you go into some of these drafts, you can get unstuck instantly. And I think of all the formats I play in, charity tournaments are the one where I need to do the most research going into the draft.
Yeah, they're all very unique. They're all very different. Absolutely. Yes. There is a bit of work to do. I completely agree with that. I would say, though, there's multiple schools of thought here with the charity leagues, right? Some of them are... Let's talk in real terms, right? In the JTT Cup, 600 people this year. The Scottish Bowl going to be over 4,000 people. The Warrior Bowl, I think, is over 1,000 people, close to 1,000 people. The FFCC, nearly 300 people, right? So your odds of winning it are quite small. Some of those events where they're best ball, I think they shrink quite significantly. I think the in-season ones potentially have a different percentage. I don't think it's much different, but I think a somewhat different percentage. And I think that I would rather someone come in with the philosophy of, do you know what? I'm just going to draft guys I love, and I'm just going to have fun. And I'm totally cool with that, by the way, as a strategy. I'm like, yeah, fair enough. Because if you're if you think about it, the probability of winning is slim. So, like, if you're going to just draft your guys and think, hey, I don't get to draft this guy anyway, I'm going to draft him, I'm all for that. Like, as a strategy, I think, yeah, fine. Have fun. It's a charity league. Chance of winning, slow, small, slim, whatever. If you are seriously considering taking it seriously, then yes, you do have to do the research beforehand. But I think as well, the thing that I would recommend to anybody who does these large charity leagues is your build has to be unique. And what I mean by that is you've got multiple drafts going on, and too many people, we said this last year, too many people seek consensus picks. And the problem with that is that if you follow the build, and you get these really large charity tournaments like the Scottish Bowl, like the Warrior Bowl, where they have pick chats. See, like if you're the first pick, there's a pick channel for like all the first picks. If you're the sixth pick, use the channel for the sixth pick. And they're all seeking consensus. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. Now, it kind of seems like fun. You're all kind of talking and you're all kind of putting together. You're also all in the same tournament. You might not be in the same draft, but you're in the same tournament. So you are collaborating with other people and you could be giving advice to someone who might end up winning the tournament, and vice versa. I'm not saying don't share information. I'm all for that. My point is that people go into those chats and they seek a consensus. I'm stuck between this guy and this guy. Who should I pick? Now, I'm not being funny. They're not your friend. Like, they might be friends. But I mean, like, they are competitors. Now, I'm sure they might give you a very genuine answer. The problem with building a roster on consensus is it kind of just leaves you in this really meh situation where you end up getting guys. You got to remember what people are basing consensus off. They're basing their consensus and picks off of standard league scoring, and they're going on the resources like Fantasy Pros. Like, they're going on all these resources, and they've been following podcasts and advice in leagues, and they get hyped about players, but the scoring isn't necessarily always taken into account. They look at it and they're comparing standard scoring into situations, and it's only very few people that have projections based on the scoring that is done for those events. And then on top of that, those who have it and share it, then it becomes free information to everybody. Everybody's picking off the same sheet. Therefore, you become very predictable in how you do your drafts. So my point is that effectively in here, there's a couple of schools of thought, but the one to me is you've got to build different. You've got to do something that people aren't anticipating that you're going to do, And you have to do something that's really, really bold. Like you've just talked about a strategy. You went into a draft, 10 starting quarterbacks, and you sacked it. Right, I'm not going for it. It's a bold strategy. It might not work, but it's the kind of thing, but it's the kind of thing that can work. The worst thing you can do is build mediocre. And like if you take nothing away from this show, the worst thing you can do is build mediocre. Mediocre in a dynasty league is fine. Mediocre in a redraft league is fine because you're going to have opportunities to replenish your squad. You can do trades. You can do free agency. You can do all these sorts of things that allow you to change mediocre to good.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do that in these leagues. They're so deep and deep rosters that very few relevant players make it to free agency. So your draft is kind of it, especially if it's best ball, then it is it. So if you draft mediocre players with no ceiling, it is really suboptimal performance. So like for me, if you've got a choice between, and here's a prime example, let's go wide receiver, right? And you've got a chance to draft
Please do not make me pick between these two picks and make me look silly.
No. But if you have, I'm just trying to think of a good example. So if you had the choice to pick between, say, Romeo Dobbs of Green Bay, who's Green Bay's third wide receiver, or Raheem Shaheed of the Saints, in a charity or best ball format, you've got to pick Shaheed because Shaheed could have a wide receiver top 5 week. Like that is in his range of outcomes. He could have a wide receiver 100 week, but he has a ceiling to him. He has an opportunity to make a significant impact. Romeo Dobbs is at best going to get a wide receiver 24 week. Like he would need a lot of things to go his way to have a really big week. I'm not slating the player. I think he will have very mediocre fantasy production, but his window is anywhere from wide receiver 36 to wide receiver 60. And it's such a small distance between there. He can fall anywhere in between, but the ceiling isn't really there because you've got Jaden Reed. You've got Christian Watson there. You've got Jacobs is there now. Like you've got players that are going to take away his ceiling, and he might have one good week, but he's not going to have enough to get him to where he needs to get to. Whereas Shaheed could literally have a 3 for 132 and 2 week. Like that happens. And then the following week, he can have 0 for 0. Like, he can have nothing. But he's going to have an impact at some point on your roster when you need it. Again, you're looking at guys like Darius Slayton. Again, most weeks probably going to do absolutely naff all, but he's going to have weeks. But I'd rather have Slayton than, say, Jalen Hyatt on that team. You know, you have to pick the players that have got the pathway to make a significant impact. Again, you look at the Dolphins, you'd rather have someone like Achane over someone like Mostert. You know, picking these safety picks don't pay out for you. So you've got to go and shoot for the moon.
Let me ask you a question, Murph, and this is potentially a do or don't. How many in these best ball formats, how many upside players do you think? How early in your draft do you shoot for upside? Or
Round
should
1.
you? So every pick should be an upside pick.
Correct.
So if you are torn between two players, pick the player who could have that blow up week as opposed to the consistency of player B, for instance.
I want to pick a player every round that might not be the best in ADP wise. He might not even be the best from a floor perspective, but he's got the opportunity to have a great ceiling. So look, let's just pull open a draft on ADP, right? All right. So got a draft that's quite early. This one kicked off today. So here we go. I'll give you an example. So this is the Orkney Bowl. First round, it's a 10-team draft, okay? This is how the draft goes. McCaffrey at 1, Lamb at 2, Allen at 3. It's super flex, by the way. Hurts at 4, Mahomes at 5, Jackson at 6, Stroud at 7. Right? So that's 5 QBs in a row. I'm on the clock at 8. Now, most people will take a quarterback. 5 have gone. Oh, can't let more go. But I'm either taking the 6th best QB at round 1 at best, or I can go and take who I had in my rankings as the 2nd best player in this scoring format. By the way, that wasn't Justin Jefferson. It was Tyreek Hill. So I took Tyreek Hill. And again, in conventional tournament, you take, in a conventional league, Justin Jefferson over Tyreek Hill. But the way that this scoring is done and the ceiling, I'm going Hill and Tua have that connection. I can see there. I don't see a pathway to Jefferson getting 2,000 yards with Addison there and with JJ McCarthy taking the realm, being a rookie quarterback. Like, I just don't see it. I think he's going to be a great player. I think he's going to have a great ceiling. If everything breaks right for Tyreek Hill, he can have a 2,000-yard season. So I don't want the floor. I want the ceiling. So that is why I went and took Tyreek Hill. Right. Joe Burrow comes off the board, next QB. The guy at the end, and I kind of rate this as a strategy, punted QB altogether. He went Jefferson and Chase.
Oof.
Which, I mean, I get it. Like, it's at least like I get that as a strategy. It's not what I would have done, but I get it. Like, at least that's bold. It's different. It's out there, and I respect it. Comes back, has Breece Hall, and it gets to me, and I think, okay, now I'm looking at the QBs on the board. And it's like Dak Prescott, Jordan Love, Kyler Murray, Brock Purdy. And I'm like, I don't want any of those. I'm going to take Anthony Richardson. Because Anthony Richardson on his best day could be a top 4, top 5 QB.
Mm-hmm.
Could sink, but he's got rushing ability, big arm, big play. Like, I've missed out on the elite. Give me the guy who can threaten the elite, and that's Anthony Richardson. The rest of these guys can't. Dak Prescott's not going to threaten them. Jordan Love's not threatening them. Kyler Murray's not threatening them. Justin Herbert's not threatening them. Tua's not threatening. Like, no one else is threatening them. Give me the guy who has a chance. And yeah, it probably won't happen, but that's what I mean. So, goes all the way back round, gets to the 3rd round. A few more QBs have gone. A few wide receivers gone. It gets to me, and I'm like, Jonathan Taylor's still on there. Jonathan Taylor was the RB1 a couple of seasons ago. I'll take the stack of Richardson Taylor. That sounds great to me. And, not to give away the full strategy, but Michael Pittman might still be there when I get back. And guess what? I'm going to go with the Colts. Why not? Like, the Colts could be with Shane Steichen, who is an offensive guru, and I'm going to take all the weapons of the Colts. Yeah, I'll ride that all day long. It's a bold strategy, but you know what? I can see a pathway to success there. And I'm looking at the wide receivers. The only wide receiver there who's currently on the board, who I would have over him, is Devontae Adams.
But even that could be stinky.
Right. Gardner Minshew. Like, if Michael Pittman is still there in a few picks time, Chris Olave is the other one, actually. Chris Olave is still there. Again, with Derek Carr, yeah, I'd shoot for the moon. Like, if I'm thinking Anthony Richardson's going to the moon, and I've got Jonathan Taylor go to the moon, let's just go all in. Like, it's and that's like how to explain it is every round is upside in this sort of format, because it's either going to be brilliant or it's going to fail spectacularly. But the one thing it won't be is boring and mediocre. There's no point having a floor play player. No point. Because a floor play player is not going to get you where you need to get to. You might squeak a playoff appearance. Maybe. And then what?
Yeah. Just out of interest, did Travis Kelce go earlier? Where did Travis Kelce go?
The pick before Taylor.
Would you have considered him instead of Taylor there?
No. I might have done if he'd made it back to the 4th round. As soon as I saw Taylor was still on the board, given this is the running backs are gone at this point, McCaffrey, Hall, Robinson, Gibbs, Barkley, Etienne. So for me, the teardrop, the only other guy who is anywhere near him in this draft is Kyron Williams.
And could be in trouble.
I don't think he will be. But everyone else after that, you got Jacobs, Henry, White, Akane, Pacheco, Walker, Cook. Like, at this point, we're just going into a territory where they're all kind of much of a muchness. Like, Taylor's an elite We've seen it. He's an elite player who I get at a discount because he didn't play much last year. I'm taking that. And like, that's the strategy, is always shoot for the moon. Every pick, just go with the upside player. Throw caution to the wind. Am I going to win the Orkney Bowl? No. Not going to win it. Unless it all breaks right for me. And if it does, then happy days. I'll wear a crown. I'll come on here and declare myself like the almighty Orkney Bowl champion. I'll get Johnny Edwards on here. I'm sure he's listening. And he'll crown me. I don't mind. Like, I'll phone him up and like, whatever. And we'll all hail how brilliant. But I'm jesting here, obviously. Like, ultimately, I want to pick a team that's fun. I want to pick a team that's high upside and could do some damage. And if it does damage, you never know. But I'm not going to pick boring, safe players who are just like, I love Mike Evans. I love Mike Evans to pieces. Mike Evans is one of my all-time favorite players. Wouldn't pick him in this sort of format. He will have good weeks. He'll have bad weeks, but he never has an elite, like the truly like wide receiver 1, 280-yard free touchdown week.
Yeah.
So, like, and very few people do, right? But ultimately, Pittman has that in his locker. With Anthony Richardson, not much on the other side. Yeah, I think
poor Adonai Mitchell.
I listen. I love AD Mitchell probably more than most people, but it's going to take him a year. He's a war prospect.
No, I was poking fun of your Mitchell.
Well, yeah, I know, but I love AD Mitchell, so I'm fine with that. Like Stephon Diggs, why would you take him in this format? You can't take someone like him. You can't take DJ Moore in this format. You can't take these players. Let other people take those players. Shoot for the moon. Go big. Just go big. Be bold.
Is there because you obviously create your own scoring rankings based on the scoring for not each tournament, but for some of these tournaments, you have your own. Is that something you do personally, or is there a tool people can use to put points in to create? Like, do you use your rankings and a tool to change the points, or is there something online that people can use to change the points to give?
I hookied someone's sheet to create a sheet that gave me points. But there is a place you can do projections.
Because way back when, a long time ago, when I did projections, Kyle Yates gave me his template, and I probably have it somewhere now, but I don't do rankings at the moment. I might do, I don't know, depending on time wise and stuff. But Rob, who used to pod with us and stuff, he's, with Kyle's permission, taken that and changed it into something that is quite frankly phenomenal. And if you get the chance to see it, Murph, I can't describe
I've seen it. It's great. Well, I haven't seen probably the most recent iteration, but I saw previous versions of it. It's phenomenal.
It is phenomenal. And he plugs in, so you do your rankings on there, but then there's a scoring sheet on there where you add the different scorings and stuff, and it spits out rankings based on whether it be tight end premium or super flex but you can add in all the little scores that people change in their leagues. And like we see in these charity events, they all try and make themselves a bit different to stand out from the crowd per se. You can add it to there. So I wondered if there was like a global thing that people can use, because I know sometimes
I know with some subscription sites you can. I'm trying to think. The only one I think that might have a free one is Yards Per Fantasy, potentially. It's weird because their site is so similar to us. It's not even funny.
I want to look this up now.
Mate, go look it up. You'll look how similar it is.
Yards Per Fantasy.
Yeah. Like the color, the font. They've used obviously the same stencil that we did.
Who are these people?
I know them quite well. They've been going for about 10 years. They're good peoples. But like the menus are the same in the same font and stuff like that.
That is weird.
Yeah, it is. But yeah,
they obviously know what they're doing.
But my point is, I think you might be able to do custom stuff on here. I think you can. If not, they definitely have a template for projections you can do. And that I think it's like $10. And I think you can go ahead and build your own like projection, and then they do this Scottish Bowl stuff in there. I think that's quite a good way. If not, like there's a gap in the market for someone to have that. I've always done it for the Patreons that if they want some custom scoring off my projections, I'll do that for them.
Nice.
But yeah, I think the way I look at it is, I think Sleeper, like if let's say you just don't have that and you want to do a quick guide, like most of these drafts are on Sleeper, you can filter by points, and it will give you the Sleeper projections for that league. Now, what I would do is I would look at these sort of Sleeper projection by points. And then what I would do is look at some consensus guides and start to sort of play around with where their projections are in line with the consensus. And then I would, or your favorite analysts or whatever it might be, and merge your own list. And then you can kind of hooky a rankings list based off of that. That's never a bad way of doing it. Because at least in Sleeper, they'll give you what their projections are. So they'll get 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns or whatever it is if it's a wide receiver.
Yeah.
So then you can say, oh, well, I don't know if that is what I think they'll get. I can benchmark that against what other people are doing and then come to some form of hooky creating rankings. But I think the point stands of, I don't necessarily think you even need to do projections, because if you do projections, let's say you take someone's projections, or let's say you benchmark projections, or you Sleeper projections, you're still only taking a aggregated view of what that player will do. And actually, it's not about that. It's about what their ceiling is. The projection is not going to give you the ceiling projection. It's going to give you what it thinks it's going to do. So, effectively, they're all kind of irrelevant anyway. What you need to do is think about, if everything was to break right, and again, I go back to that, you heard the logic on my first round pick. I don't think Justin Jefferson with Jordan Addison there and a rookie quarterback and TJ Hawkinson is going to get a 2,000-yard season. But I can absolutely see a world where Tyreek Hill can. I'm not saying he's going to. I'm saying he can. I'm saying the possibility is there.
We've nearly seen it.
Right, and so that is my point, is we've nearly seen it. So it's possible. I think it's possible. Is it likely? I don't know, but I know it's possible. So give me the art of the possible. Give me something out there that has a chance. I look at Jonathan Taylor. We've seen him put up a 2,000-yard season across receiving and rushing. Have we seen that from Pacheco, Kyron Williams? No. Art of the possible stuff. If things break right, can it be elite? And that's the question you've got to ask yourself. Can there be an elite season on that player? Or what's the pathway to them being elite? Is it an injury? I almost think in this format, rather than taking like an RB 22 to 24, why not take the guy on the who's basically next man up and can have a top 5 season for the rest of the season?
Yeah.
Why take someone like Najee Harris, Jonathan Brooks, right? When you can sit there and think Nick Chubb's going after them in ADP. Listen, made of glass, could fall apart. But Nick Chubb has had multiple top 10 RB seasons.
Yeah.
Why would I want Austin Eckler at ADP 103 when I can have Gus Edwards at ADP 125, who's the starting back on his team, potentially could have a 12 to 1,400-yard season? What's Austin Eckler doing at Washington? He's catching passes and is a short-term option. maybe I'll look at float at someone like Jerome Ford in case we saw it last season. It's a very, very good option. These are the examples. I'd rather take someone like Benson for when Connor falls apart and there's no one behind him than Jonathan Brooks, because we haven't seen a top running back come out of Carolina since McCaffrey. So why do I don't chase mediocre. Give me the guy. Like, give me Ty Chandler as a guy I'd chase in this format. There's an injury at running back. He could take an elite role. Give me Rico Dowdle. Is Zeke really going to be the guy? I don't think so. They let him go. Give me Rico Dowdle. Like, take some shots. Don't draft a Clyde Edwards-Helaire. There's no point. Pick guys who have a pathway. Someone like Bucky Irving is going to be the guy behind Rashad White. Something happens to Rashad White, Bucky Irving's the next guy up. You get him cheap. Don't go and get someone like Samaje Perine who's not going to do anything. It's just about analyzing situations, looking at understanding depth charts, and maybe we'll do a whole series on depth charts, and we'll look at pathways to success of teams and players. Because I think that is key. That's going to be the real key piece here, is understanding where the opportunity for these next guys up are. Because your roster is going to be decimated by injuries, probably, or possibly. And you have to, or these NFL rosters are going to be. So if you can pick these pathways and pick these players who can all of a sudden usurp to glory, like Puka Nacua last year, then all of a sudden you've got this chance to really do something special. Like, if you drafted Puka Nacua in these tournaments last year, you probably did pretty well. And that's because and that's my point, is that those sorts of, all right, that's lightning in a bottle, that's an extreme circumstance, but there are people who took backup quarterbacks, for example, and all of a sudden they've usurped onto their rosters with the amount of injuries there were last year.
I think there needs to be, well, for me as well, one of the things I struggle with the most is how teams use their players and understanding how the coaches run their football teams, whether they are a run first coach or a defensively minded coach, because that for me can be confusing when I'm drafting and I think, oh, this player is going to be really good. For instance, go back a couple of years when Arthur Smith was the coach, and he loved the tight end, and then he went to the Falcons and everyone was like, well, the Falcons are going to be elite. And he'd just come from, I think he came from Tennessee with the running back, didn't he? Derrick Henry.
Yeah.
And he was
a tight end coordinator. He was a tight end coach. So everyone thought, oh, he loves tight ends because he's a tight end coach. But then they never generated any top tight end performances. So it seemed, it was, even with Kyle Pitts. But that was a flawed logic, because everyone sat there and went, well, he's a tight end coach. He will favor tight ends. And you're like, but we didn't see elite tight end performance from him.
Yeah.
So there's doing a job because it's a job and it pays and it's a coaching job and a professional team, and then there's actually doing what you want to do. And ultimately, when he had the opportunity to present his philosophy, which was crap, by the way, he didn't involve tight ends.
Yeah,
took one of 4 overall. Didn't use him. But
I think that's my point, is the understanding the coaching, not just thinking we know them from past or whatever, especially when they change teams and you think that the same thing's going to happen because the situation has changed along with the coach. And I think,
and it's also interesting because we do a show every year where we talk about the coaching changes and the impact that has. But actually, you've also got to remember that a coach is coming in with a coaching philosophy, but he might not have those players to implement that philosophy. Yep. So then you have this halfway house of what do you do in the interim? Like, how do you manage that situation? And what's the likely outcome of that? So I think that sounds like that's 2 months of shows for us. We could do each division and we can break down each week. We do a division and we talk about each coach philosophy, what we expect. But then also we could talk about the rosters for fantasy football and say, hey, if this guy goes down, the next guy up is projected to get a huge workload, and here's why. And this is, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I'm a scheme genius, but we can analyze the trends, how often we think they're going to throw the ball. They run first team. Do they use a running back by committee approach? Do they have a workhorse back? Are the wide receiver 2s and 3s worth picking in this team? What kind of volume do we expect from there? So I think that's 2 months worth of shows for us right there. I love it. I think that sort of stuff, if you can get a handle on that sort of stuff, then you're in good spot, because then, you can make those pivots in leagues, and you can also identify really good opportunities to pick players late on in drafts.
I almost feel like we're not going to be trying to reinvent the handcuff, but we are going to maybe trying to redesignate the handcuffed label, because originally that handcuff label was just grab the running back behind said running back because he's the handcuff. Whereas essentially the term handcuff will be because there is an opportunity, not just because it's, for instance, if you were to handcuff Saquon Barkley with anybody who's been a Giants running back, the guy isn't Saquon Barkley, and therefore if Saquon Barkley is running above his projected not ability, but if you stick another running back in that Giants running scheme, he isn't going to do as good because he isn't Saquon Barkley.
Which is
the handcuff statement could be potentially a running back like a Jerome Ford who will go into a running system at the Browns and be better than a running back at a team like Derrick Henry's running back for handcuff, or Saquon Barkley's handcuff. Because he is a handcuff to an elite running back, he isn't going to have that same projection.
100%. And I think what's really important here to understand and to really get your head around is it's about opportunity and it's about volume. And like, if you can find these players that have got these little pockets of volume and opportunity, and you can combine the two, those are players that should be on your radar, not someone like Devin Singletary, who you can nab it around. It's like, oh, well, he's a starting running back for the New York Giants. Great. When was the last time a running back not named Saquon Barkley did anything worthwhile at the New York Giants? And I'm not taking the mick. I'm just saying, like, for me, it's, you can plug a guy who's going to be a roster clog, who's not going to get in your lineup. You have to identify opportunities to put. Look, I'll give you a great example, right? So I got a bunch of guys together who love the Rules Mania League I run, right?
Sickos.
Where you create custom rules. And I said, okay, well, we'll do it as a dynasty then. You guys love it every year. Because I already had people ask me from last year, hey, can I get in that list of league for next year? And I was like, all right, fine. Well, look, we'll do it as a dynasty separate. And then that way I can give other people a chance to do the list of league. And like, you still apply for it. We'll see what happens. So we did it as a dynasty, right? The rules that came out, right? The rules that came out, and I won't read all of them, but there was one like you can't play any QB 2 weeks in a row. So, like, if you have a QB, you can only play 1 week and then he gets benched. Tight ends get 3 times the receiver points of wide receivers. But then the big one, right, was 1 rushing yard is worth 1 point.
Okay.
So 1 rushing yard is worth 1 point. And it's 2 points per first down. So I go into this league. So you've just seen what it was about quarterbacks. You can't start quarterbacks like every week, so therefore you even need a lot of them. But then 1 point per rushing yard. So that means a running back who rushes for 1,400 yards is going to get 1,400 points.
Yep.
First pick, Lamar Jackson. All right, rushing QB makes sense, right? Second pick, Breece Hall. Third pick, Josh Allen. Fourth pick, Justin Jefferson. Why? Why? Fifth pick, Bijan. Sixth pick, Hurts. Seventh pick, Chase. Again, why? Eighth pick, Gibbs. Oh, by the way, the other thing with this is randomized every round, the draft order.
I hate this so much.
Ninth pick, CeeDee Lamb. Why? 10th pick, Patrick Mahomes. Yeah. 8th pick, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Why? 12th pick was Christian McCaffrey, and I took Taylor at the 113. There's 14 teams in the league. Then next round, I took Kyron Williams. So my team, I started off, we're quite a way into this. First round, Jonathan Taylor. Second round, Kyron Williams. Third round, Derrick Henry. Fourth round, Kenneth Walker. I went running back. Because a QB.
How many can you start?
5. Nick Chubb, 5th round. 6th round, took a QB. Took Baker Mayfield in the 6th round. 7th round, Russell Wilson. 8th round, Geno Smith. So I threw 3 quarterbacks in a row. Yeah, but you have to rotate them. So you need to have at least, like, the way I did it was, I was going to go 2, and I thought, well, Geno was there, and then it was a massive cliff. And I thought, okay, so I've always got to rotate. I've got to factor in the bye weeks. And then on top of that, like, if one goes down, I'm all right. I can always keep rotating. I've always got a starter. That's all I need is a starter.
That's fair.
So, like, at the end of the day, I don't need that position to be elite. I just need, like, the points that I'm going to get at that position. And then I didn't pick my first one. And then I don't think I picked my first wide receiver. 9th round, I went Dalton Schultz. So I didn't pick a receiver until the 10th round. That's George Pickens, by the way. Then I went back to running back for Rico Dowdle at the 11th round. Then I went Keenan Allen and Nuke, 12th, 13th. Went Darren Waller at the 14th round. I thought, well, he's not retired yet. If he doesn't retire, I'm set. Then I took some wide receivers, and then kickers. It's to start 2 kickers, by the way. So I end up having to pick, and you can only start 1 from each team. So you have to be careful where you select your kickers and stuff like that. It's a mess.
You lot are. This is not fun.
It's hilarious.
It sounds fun, but I'm not about it, if I'm honest.
But my point is that all those people that took wide receiver in the first round,
yeah,
like the scoring doesn't legislate for it. Like if I look at Jamar Chase last year, granted, okay, he was injured, okay, but he was still a wide receiver 1.
And he had 6 games without Joe Burrow.
Yeah, but he had 1 week where he scored 74 points in the scoring. Then he had 1 week. Then he had 1 week it was 40, and then the rest of them were like 24 and below, 27 below. Then I go. This is where it's going. Then I go into Kyron Williams.
This is ridiculous. For anyone still listening, I apologize.
Kyron Williams is weeks. Okay.
Yeah.
66, 88, 44, 130, 59, 180, 83, 107, 126, 181, 114, 140.
Why wouldn't you go 5 running backs to start this?
Right. And keep in mind, Kyron Williams went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 picks after. I mean, Marvin Harrison Jr. was taken before him.
No.
But that's my point, is like, again, shoot for the moon. Like, just shoot for the moon, come up with a crazy strategy. I've got some other tips. I'll give you some more fundamental tips because I kind of like feel like we've gone quite broad. Other tips, I think, for success in Superflex charity leagues. Got to draft 4 quarterbacks. And I know you hate that.
No, I do, but I understand completely why. I only hate it because something in my brain restricts me from drafting a quarterback early.
Well, the only reason you've got to draft 4 quarterbacks is the last 2 years. So the last 2 years has been an unprecedented number of quarterback injuries. Now, it could be reverting back to the mean. But my point is if you have 3 quarterbacks, you lose 1 for a significant amount of time in week 2, your season is kind of derailed. Because you're going to get to the bye weeks, and you're going to have 2 weeks where you can't start 2 quarterbacks. You're already conceding an advantage to the rest of the field.
Yep.
You lose the second quarterback, you're almost done. Unless your 1 QB left is elite, you are really struggling. So I think you have to draft 4 quarterbacks. Now, obviously, not everyone can draft 4 quarterbacks if you're in a 12-team league because they don't exist unless you pick backups. But ultimately, I think you've got to pick you've got to have 4 QBs, I think, to be successful in this format. And I know what I've said about floor. Ultimately, there is sacrificing floor for ceiling, and then there's sacrificing floor for elimination. And I think with the quarterback position, because of how fundamental it is to the structure of your scoring for your team. Now, if it's at a point where you're in a league where negative scoring is a possibility, like the Scott Fish Bowl potentially, then that's a different story. But if you're in a league where that isn't the case, then you've got to have 4 QBs. I think you got to structure your team with 4 QBs. I think that's really important. I think I like the anchor RB approach where you would pick one solid running back who's an elite player, and then you punt the position, flood it with high ceiling players, and then go for those high ceiling running backs later on. Don't get sucked into the mediocre RB situation. It's another way around it. A tight end, I think, if you can get one of the top 3 to 5 guys, go for it. If not, punt it, because I don't think there's any value. Outside of that, I think the rest are a bit of a muchness outside of sort of seventh tight end down. I think there's no separation there, so don't race. The other thing as well, and here's my favorite thing, is people who play in a tight end premium league seem to think that because the tight end can earn more money or more points per reception than wide receivers, they should do it. That strategy on the surface sounds positive, right? There is a giant flaw. And a giant flaw to that prospect is once you get past QB6, QB7 to 12 have the same amount of receptions. Therefore, in score, relatively similar.
Tight end, not QB.
Sorry, tight end. Sorry, correct. But yeah, the reception levels from tight end 7 to tight end 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, maybe as far as 14, there's probably maybe 10 in it. So they're probably in that sort of like 60 to 50 range, give or take.
Also, realistically, in tight end premium, how close to the top receivers does it push? Obviously, Travis Kelce historically has been...
It'll push the elite up. The rest will be they'll be elevated from really poor to mediocre. So, like a tight end premium, you might get guys who would be like the equivalent of the wide receiver 60, and it will elevate into like the wide receiver 40.
And then you're still talking,
mediocre.
Bench play at that. Yeah.
But my other point is that everyone goes, well, I'll take the tight ends because they're worth more, which in theory works. But when all the other tight ends behind them are worth the same, there's no advantage. If you have a tier of like 8 players and they have a differential of 15 to 20 points in the season, if you take the top of the tier, you're not getting any benefit to getting the bottom of the tier. 15 to 20 points over a season is 1 point per week. If you can you'll make that edge up by constructing your roster with high upside wide receivers, high upside running backs. And then when that tier is thinning out, then you go and pluck the tight end.
Yeah.
Because you're not sacrificing much. The people tend to think like, oh, well, it's the premium, but they're not looking at the reception numbers. So they think, oh, okay, the tight end 8 is going to get more receptions than the tight end 14. They will, but it's not a lot.
Yeah.
and the differential's just not really there. And that's that at the elite of the position, 100%, the Sam Laportas, the Travis Kelce's, even the Trey McBrides. Yeah, go ham. Mark Andrews, yeah, go ham, fine. Everyone else, it kind of like the Njokus, the Ingrams, there's a nice significant boost, but it's not bad reaching a little bit, but don't go crazy. After that, it really doesn't matter. Like the ship has sailed. So just treat it as a standard tight end position because the differential there is not great. It's not huge. It's not enough to focus on. And people get sucked into the tight end premium and they chase the position. And again, if you're chasing a position, quarterback, tight end, if you're running back, if you're chasing the position, you punt the value. And when you punt the value to somebody else, the person behind you gets the value. So a lot of people get scared of missing out on players. Actually, you shouldn't be worried about missing out on players because it forces you to reach to grab a mediocre player. And so when you do that, you kill your team.
Yeah.
I'm all for grabbing the last guy in a tier. So I talked about, that rules mania. I grabbed Geno Smith because the tier fell off a cliff. Like the next differential down was about 70 points with the scoring. I was happy to do that. I probably reached a round up, but 70 points is a significant margin to the next guy on my list. So I'm okay with that. I'm okay with reaching. And this is the thing. Like, people talk about don't reach for players. Like, absolutely reach for players in situations like that. Absolutely reach. When there is a significant teardrop, you've absolutely got to reach. It's okay to reach. What does reach mean? In equation to what? ADP? Who cares? If you're drafting these leagues off ADP, you've already lost. You might as well have just chucked the money away and said, cheers for the donation, here for a good time. Like, if you're drafting these leagues off ADP, you're already out of it. You cannot reach for a player if you see an edge that other people don't. That's not reaching, that's strategy. There's difference. I got it so many times when people reviewed my drafts and went, you've reached for Deebo Samuel. No, I didn't. I saw a significant edge to taking him over the next guy on the list at wide receiver, and I valued him very differently to the rest of the room, and it paid off. And there's a difference. If there is a plausible reason and you have rationale, it's not a reach, it's a strategy play. It's very, very different. The room thinks you reached, you get double benefit because then they think you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
If someone says to me, I've reached for a player and I know exactly what I'm doing, I've got them right where I want them because they think I'm a donor. And I'm okay with that. Like, if people think I'm stupid, or if people can't see what I can see, that gives me the edge. There's a saying in poker that if you don't know who the fish is at the table, you're the fish. So if you can see the play and other people can't, you're the savvy one. You're the one that has the strategy. And if your strategy's off, it doesn't matter. Like, I'd rather be wrong and have gone in with a strategy, execute that strategy and been well off base and gone, I took a shot, it didn't work, then just gone off ADP or mediocre and just not got a plan and put together a mediocre team that finishes mid-table.
Yeah. And the worst thing about going off ADP, not the worst thing, but we saw last year that the sleeper ADP and projections and stuff was miles off where it should have been. And yet people were using that ADP as gospel. And you think with your Deebo Samuel pick, for instance, you took him third round, right? Which means you've got him as a top 36 pick player because you took him third round, whereas his ADP could be fifth round, for instance, and people think you've reached, but it's not a reach because, like you said, you've got a strategy and he is in your top 36. So therefore he is ADP for you, a third round player.
I also didn't trust he would be there at ADP. There were two other San Francisco 49ers fans in that draft. So you have to elevate that they think they're going to go for him.
Yeah.
One of them was picking behind me. I picked him late third, so pick 35. So I was like, I don't know. The guy at 36, 37 is a San Francisco 49ers fan. I don't know if he remains. So I'm happy with the value there. I could have punted to the fourth round, but I didn't. I'm happy it didn't. It was him and ETN, and I got both my guys. So I was more than happy with the way it felt. Yeah. But I didn't want to take the risk. And it's because I looked at the rest. I looked at who was behind me, who was picking, thinking he could go. It turned out he didn't. He wouldn't have. I asked him afterwards, and he said he wouldn't go. But I didn't want to take the risk.
And you don't know. So base your pick on what you do know. And that 100%. Is that he could be picked by the San Francisco fan.
And you make a good point about ADP. We called out, how many players did we call out last preseason that we just kept saying these numbers are off. Like, there was value all over the shop last year. There was so much value in players that we called out time and time and time again. If you listen to us, you probably won a few ships because we were giving you 3rd, 4th round players in the 7th and 8th round. There were too many players that were undervalued. Now, it's too early to kind of go off what it's looking like. I don't think it will ever be that bad again because I think that the environment was just off last year. But what I will say is the more people that get into being analysts and creating content, the more you're going to skew the variance, because what it's doing is it's putting together this false sense of, it's like an alternate consensus.
Yeah.
People are following the alternate consensus, and that's great because I'll go against them. I'll play the contrarian play, and it will work out for me more often than it will work out for them. And I think if you have and that's not to say I'm a better analyst than anybody, it's about the strategy. Like, it's all good having, these hot takes, right? And I hate it when someone asks me a question. Who would you rather take, Tank Dell or Christian Kirk? And I just go like that. In what? Where's the context?
Yeah.
What's the scoring? What's the roster construction?
Yeah.
Is it a dynasty league? Is it a redraft league? What's the scoring? Is there points for first downs? Is there points for what's the points per reception? People, I'm not being a dick when I ask those questions and people give me who would you rather play, this or this? I don't know your league format. I don't play in it. It's not me being a dick. It's me trying to give you the best advice I can.
Yeah. Otherwise, just flick Fantasy Pros on and choose who they have higher. Basically.
Right. But then, and that's always without context. And that's the thing. And the context also goes with who's in your flex. Because it might be both.
Yeah.
I could look at the rest of your lineup and say, oh, well, don't start that running back this week. Play them both.
Yeah.
Like, that's the context that's missing. And the same goes with your strategy. So, look, we're an hour in, so I'll recap really briefly. Go in with a plan, understand the scoring. I mean, that's pretty basic kind of stuff. But if you're not sure, ask people. But don't forget, in those pick chats and everything else, don't draw a consensus. Come up with your own plan. Shoot for upside every single pick. Don't chase the draft. Don't let the draft force you to make a move that you don't want to make. Be brave in your decision making. Always go with the upside. Take 4 quarterbacks. Always, instead of taking a mediocre starting running back, take a high upside bench or backup running back a few rounds later. Go for the Jerome Fords. Go for the Elijah Mitchells. Go for the Bucky Irvings. Go for those guys. Don't go for the Devin Singletrees and the roster clogs who realistically aren't going to make a huge difference to you. Don't chase running back 28. Chase running back 5, running back 10. Don't go with mediocre, low-end wide receivers. Chase the Shaheeds, chase the game wreckers every week. Don't put people like Stephon Diggs on your teams. Shoot for the ceiling. Find the ceiling play and go after that. And if it means you have to reach for guys, it's only a reach. It's only a reach by conception. It's
a reach in other people's eyes.
Correct. But if you have a strategy and you have a ploy and you have them ranked differently, it's not a reach. If it's on your board, you don't always have to chase the top of a tier. You create a tier for the reason. As long as you get the guy in the middle at the bottom of the tier, that's okay. Understand the teardrops. We talk about this so many times, the vertical board and the horizontal board. You have a list of your tiers. If you can able to identify your teardrops, but then you have to understand the position drop on that as well. What I mean by that is my team might have a need. I haven't filled all my starters yet. I might need a wide receiver. But hey, I have 8 wide receivers in my tier, and there's 7 picks before the pick after the one I'm about to make. So one of those guys is going to make it back mathematically to my next pick. But I might have one running back in the current tier at the top. There might be, say, tier 3. And then there's a significant drop to the next tier. I'll take the running back. Don't fill the starter because they'll come back. You know, if you've got them in a tier, it means you've got them ranked pretty closely. Whether you get the guy at the top of the tier or the guy at 8th in the tier, they're in a tier for a reason. It means you haven't got that much separation between them. Take the guys who are in a tier above, in a tier of their own, or near the tier of their own, and think, okay, well, I'm going to get the choice of at least 2 of these wide receivers in the next round. I'll punt that. I'll get that in the next round. I'll take the running back now because there's a significant tier drop.
We did a show. Sorry, Murph. We did a show last year where we did a mock draft based on a tier system.
Yeah.
And we picked our players on the tiers that we had, not necessarily, like you just said, on starting position needs. I think it would be interesting to do that again and explain tiers more thoroughly and what the difference between one, like the tier, you in your tier 1, what is the difference between position 1 and position X of the last of that tier, and why there is the difference in points in your tiers, because what makes a tier is basically what I'm saying. How many points in a tier and how do you come to that conclusion?
It's slightly subjective, but we can definitely do that. It is slightly subjective. But effectively for me, how I do it is I look at groups of players. I don't have like a set, well, if there's a 10-point drop, that's a tier. I look at it in terms of there's a logical gap. You could have like a gap from top to bottom in one tier of 30 points. You could have a gap in the next tier is only 15 points. It's all about understanding where the lines are going to be drawn. And it is slightly subjective, but you have to look at, and you have to understand, why am I drawing the line there? Why am I not including the next guy up or down? And it really will be those subjective calls about ceiling, where even though we're going on projected points, it might be that those guys above have the opportunity to really outperform those numbers. And the guy is, I'll give you an example. Last year, I had a tier, and it was, I can't remember who the person at the bottom of the tier was, but the next tier was Kenneth Walker. It might have been ETN and Kenneth Walker. I can't quite remember, but it was someone. And I had them projected by 4 points. But I had Kenneth Walker thinking, I just don't see Kenneth Walker getting, like with Charbonnet there, I don't see Kenneth Walker going well above that number. I see him getting to his tier, it's almost like I feel like his projection, he's not got much more room to grow out of that projection.
Yeah.
Whereas the guy in the next tier, I was like, fundamentally, the guy behind him can't do much. I think he can smash that number. So even though projected wise, I think I've got them the same, I actually value their outcomes can be quite significantly different if all things were to break right for each player. And so that's an example of a tier break that on paper looks so minuscule. It's like, well, you could make an argument that they should be in the same tier, but actually it's that subjective call that comes from experience. And we can definitely do this. I can take my projections, I can put them in a sheet. We can sit here and map out where I would put tiers and explain it. In fact, I won't even draw the tiers. We can draw the tiers together. I don't mind. We can do that.
Yeah, I think that'd be useful because we talk about tiers a lot and taking players
We've
from
written
those
about
tiers,
them, haven't we, in the playbook and all sorts. And yeah,
but for the uninitiated, you know what I'm saying? They might look at these tiers and think, well, why is he in this tier and why is he not? And what is the difference? Why is that a tier? Just because you say these are my tier 2 people, why are they in there? And I know this based on rankings, and you drop them down your rankings and you have these gaps, but you might think, well, what's the difference? Why would he be there, and why is there 5 players in tier 1 but 15 players in tier 2? You know, why aren't the tiers 5, 5, 5, 5?
Yeah, and yeah, we can go through and explain that, but ultimately it's really simple. It's subjective.
But all fantasy football rankings are subjective.
Correct. It's exactly that. They're all subjective. None of them are right and none of them are wrong. None of them are right, none of them are wrong. Like, when people rip me for rankings, I'm like, it's an opinion.
Mm-hmm.
It's an opinion. It's not fact.
Yeah.
It's an educated guess.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not saying it's going to happen. It's saying it's a prediction. It is literally a case of me putting an idea out and saying, this is what I think it is based on maths, formula, historical performance, opportunity, blah, 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 blah. It's a prediction.
Yeah.
It's not fact.
These
So
are factors.
You can't argue. Like, you can argue against opinions, but ultimately, my viewpoint is if you've got an alternative opinion, good on you. Like, I'm happy, genuinely. And I'm not, that might have sounded condescending, but I'm being serious. I want people to have alternative views. Because listen, this show, as long as we've been doing it, 7 years, however long, right? 800, nearly 50 episodes. I don't think at any point we've told people to pick players. It's not what this show is about.
We have always said we will give you the information to make your own decisions.
100%. And we will teach you the strategy. And if you come up with an alternative strategy based on the formulaic principles of this podcast and the things that we've written and the books that we've written, I couldn't be happier. Genuinely couldn't be happier. Whether I agree or disagree, I madly respect you for coming up with an alternative view, because that's hard.
Yeah.
But that is also the game. That's a winning mindset. You cannot pick off Fantasy Pros ECR every single year and win every year. Cannot happen. Might win one year, you won't win every year. If you develop an alternative strategy that is unique to you in the way that you play based on the way you believe the game should be played, you'll have a higher chance of success. Because, one, you believe in it more. Two, you will be able to adapt in draft and into league situations. Because ultimately, the part of fantasy football that people, the good players grasp and the not so great players don't, is all the work that happens post-draft to championship. All the transactions, all the trades, all the thinking out what your opponents are going to do in your league.
Yeah.
Seeing one move ahead, 2 moves ahead, 3 moves ahead, knowing that so-and-so is probably going to drop so-and-so, you'll offer a cheap trade to nick them. Knowing that so-and-so is going to bid this much on the waiver wire, so you're going to bid over them because you know they're going to go for them because they have a deep roster need. And you might not have a significant roster need at that position, but you're blocking them from a centerpiece and you have the cash to do it. It's those subtle differences that win you championships. And it's those things that we have tried to teach all the way through all 800 plus episodes of this. And it's like, but we can't do it for you because we're not in the room. We can't make those decisions. But if we tell you that there are ways of doing things and you adopt those principles to develop your own strategy, you'll kick on. And then you'll actually outgrow this podcast because you'll end up going into the JJ Zacharyasons of this world and the advanced analytics to deep dive and get you further to where you need to be. And that's cool. Like, I'm more than like the amount of people that listen to this show for 100 episodes, 50 episodes, 200 episodes, whatever. And then they go, you guys are still covering that sort of entry level to medium level of fantasy player, talking about the strategy, developing the strategy. I've got my own. I feel comfortable. It's a good reason to not tune in every week. I hope you do, but I get it. If you feel like you've gotten everything you can, I've always said to people, like, when I do this show and I talk about it, this is what we do and why we do it. But I also see the exit point. I know that people aren't going to listen for 7 to 10 years unless they just love us, which is great. But ultimately, people will gateway because they'll either hear us talking about similar things, because we do come back and recycle content, or they'll just have different uses of their time to elevate their game further.
Yeah.
And that's good. Like, no better reason to stop listening to us than go, hey, I took everything I could and now I've developed it and now I'm off winning major money in best ball tournaments. Like, makes me happy.
Yeah. Yeah, I need to keep listening because taking quarterbacks late in Superflex is still not working for me. So, but yeah,
I think it's a different show. I think, and I think we do things that people don't do anywhere else, and I genuinely believe that. I think even this show, people might do do's and don'ts, but they'll name specific players. I don't think people navigate the strategy side as much, and I think that's what you'll always get with us is the strategy side and thinking outside the box and thinking differently. And I think that's all that I would really encourage you to do. And that's the biggest do of playing in these charity games. Be contrarian, be different. If someone wants to mock your team on keep, trade, cut, or whatever these rankings are, let them. They're someone's projections. We famously told the story at the end of last season that my Scott Fishbowl ranked in the bottom 100 of all teams drafted last year, and it finished 103rd out of 3,500 teams.
it works.
So went from the bottom 100 to the top 100.
Yeah.
With very little change.
Yeah.
Very little change. And ultimately, that's it. I had a plan. And, I'm not tooting my own horn, but I had enough belief to go with my conviction. And I've believed in my conviction, and I finished woefully bad. And I'm sure someone can screenshot me and say, I remember when you finished last in this charity league. And I'm like, yeah, probably. But I'll very rarely finish in the middle.
Well, it's exciting. Either way, it's exciting. And that's ultimately why we play fantasy football, right?
It's fun either way. It's fun just to see how bad it is. It's fun to see how good it is.
Yeah, if you can, and we'll keep coming back. That's the trouble with it. It is a mild addiction, and when you are bad, you want to go back the next year because you want to be better, and when you are good, you want to go back the next year to be good again. And that's
100%.
And then that's why we play it. That's gonna wrap up the do's and don'ts that turned into do's, maybes, here's and there's, which is why we do this. We love it. Tom, I hope you've enjoyed our voices throughout your row this week. It's nice to hear you listening again. So shout out to you, Mr. Tom. Murph, I hope you enjoy your 3-day weekend because it is Bank Holiday Monday here in the UK. Anything nice planned?
No, I'm taking the lad to football.
Nice.
I'm not going to football this week, which is good. By the way, shout out to the tens or hundreds of listeners that got in touch to say they saw me on television last weekend. I appreciate it. Yeah, I can't say it's my favorite reason I've ever gone viral, but there we go.
You just can't stay out the spotlight, Murph. You cannot stay out the spotlight. Well, I'm going to be trying to lay 40 square meters of flooring this weekend, so if you don't see me next week, it's because I'm underneath it and it beat me, but hopefully that won't happen.
Oh, before we sign off, I do have that choice between Michael Pittman and Devontae Adams in that league.
No, just do it. Just go all in on the horseshoe.
Done it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Michael Pittman to finish off Friday night. That's going to do it, Rush Nation. Until next week, as always, don't forget, keep rushing.